Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Business Insights room. Every Thursday, Tim Sullivan and I, Maya Matsuoka, lead a discussion looking for insights, developments, and new opportunities for the business in Japan. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions. So if you haven't done so yet, join us next time. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the discussions on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region.
Well, Maya, it's 8 o'clock. Did you want to kick things off?
Yes, definitely. Good morning to everybody who just joined us. It is a beautiful Thursday morning in Tokyo. I hope that it's a beautiful day where you are. Today we've got a very special guest. We have Anthony Griffin, who is a member of the Tokyo foreign community, and he works for Saga Consulting as a consultant. Also, he's a marketer and communications coach who helps small to mid-sized Japanese companies market to global audiences. What we know, most of us know Anthony the best for is also Kokoro Media. So this is a publication which many of us love because it shows a lot of thought and insight and a lot of positivity on behalf of Anthony about Japan, its culture, its business environment too. So today we're going to talk about what it takes to be successful in Japan. Anthony.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for those who are already here listening. So, Maya gave me a great introduction, but to add a few details. So, yes, I'm a communications consultant here in Tokyo. I've been here for 13 years, and currently I run a sole proprietorship called Saga Consulting, and I basically help Japanese companies market abroad through social media management, content marketing, and communications coaching. I am originally from California, and I'm 42 years old. So that means I grew up in the 80s during Japan's bubble Jidai, the bubble generation. So during that time, Japan had just a huge influence on my life as far as pop culture, the economy, technology, everything cool was coming out of Japan, and that influenced me. So fast forward to college, I was studying business, and I needed to study a foreign language, and I finally had an opportunity to try Japanese for a year, the language. I thought I would fail, but it turned out with hard work, I actually did well, and I enjoyed the language. However, I wasn't quite ready to move to Japan. I'm generally an introvert. I'm risk averse. So I went on to work. I worked in customer service, came back and got my MBA, but I kept Japan in my mind. And when I finally started working in marketing for the city of Riverside, I could start taking paid vacations finally for the first time in my life. So naturally, those first vacations were to Japan. And after coming here for two times, 2007 and 2008, I didn't want to go home, but I did. And in 2009, I moved here and I started teaching business English. That turned into corporate training. Then I was able to become the marketing manager for the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan. And then after that, I took everything I learned and started working for myself. So that's my background. And if there are questions or any comments from Timothy or Maya, I'd love to hear them.
No, I think that's a really important part. Your motivations for coming to Japan. So I appreciate that. So Anthony, did you have kind of bullet points of some things you were hoping to cover today?
If you're in the audience or you're listening to this and you are thinking about the concept of success in Japan, because I noticed Maya mentioned, finding success abroad. I think the first thing we have to do is define success. So, for example, what I'm doing, to me, is pretty modest. I make a comfortable living, but I'm not running a huge company. I'm not trying to take over the world or anything like that. And for some people, that would be great. However, for others, that's not enough. Other people, want to grow big companies or get funding and things like that. So I think that's the first step of the conversation. And then, other talking points I'd suggest were, transitioning from a career in Japan and the benefits of working for Japanese companies and gaining experience, and then transitioning to working for yourself in Japan, if that's what you want to do. And then finally, I thought we might just talk about, the what it's like to work for a Japanese company or try to work for yourself in Japan, the hurdles, the advantages, and all of those things. So that's what I had in mind so far.
That sounds great.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that quite a lot of people at the moment are trying to transition from working, for a company to working for themselves. Of course, this trend has accelerated probably due to the pandemic and different factors which led to people wanting to do a more meaningful work. But let's start with the bullet points one by one. So what's the first point once again?
That would be just defining success, or what success is to you. So because before you do anything, you have to decide what success means to you, and for everyone it's quite different. So for my example, I think I was motivated just to be able to do great work and serve the end user directly as possible. And what that means is, I have a lot of experience working for very, very bureaucratic organizations, which, is very comfortable for someone or for some people. But for me, I always wanted to interface with my end customer directly to get direct feedback on my mistakes and direct feedback on successes as well. So my initial goal was just to be able to do good work, interface directly with the people receiving that work, and make a difference that way. And if I could do that and make a comfortable living, I would consider that some form of success. And then as far as growing a business, I've attached that to my clients. So my goal isn't to grow a business for the sake of growing a business and just to say I have a big company or something like that. I will expand or grow based on the needs of my clients. So to give a clear example, 5 years ago when I first started, I was more than enough to by myself to handle my clients' needs. But in recent years, I've had to contract with translators, and just last year, I started even making contracts with additional writers and things like that because the clients needed that, not just because I wanted to do something bigger. And so, as long as clients keep needing more and more, I'll follow their needs and keep delivering on that value. So that's my answer, and I think that everybody needs to figure out, as Simon Sinek would say, what is their why? Why are you interested in starting a business? Why do you feel like you need to leave your company or stay at your company? And what success means to you?
You said working for an organization can feel really comfortable. But, at the end of the day, some people do realize that they want that direct touch with the end customers, and they want to do the best work which serves their customers. But I think that there is a change of mindset which you need to go through, because from working to an organization to setting up your own company, of course, there are quite a few things which make this transition challenging. So I wonder, what was the most challenging part of it for you?
Great question. For me, honestly, I've always been interested in working for myself, in college, definitely graduate school. However, I never had a solid idea. I experimented with freelance copywriting and marketing consulting in the States, but it just never took off there. So for me, the most difficult part was finding an idea to build something on. And fortunately, and one of the reasons I love Japan is Japan gave me the idea and the network to do this. And really, that just came from working for different companies and being mindful while working there, observing pain points and problems with customers and colleagues. And that's where I got all these ideas about what kind of marketing people need or what kind of communication coaching people needed and things like that. So, getting the idea was the most difficult challenge for me. But that was because I always had an kind of entrepreneurial mindset, even working for a company. So I treated my boss and colleagues as clients, and I was always trying to serve their needs internally. So I think that was always there. I just didn't have the idea, but fortunately, I could earn a living and gain experience while that idea started building. So yeah, getting that first idea was the most difficult.
That's fascinating. Because I'm saying that it's fascinating because when I applied for postgraduate school here, this was one of the points, one of the essays which I wrote. The changing mindset was the most difficult one for me too. So it was really, it's fascinating to hear it, and I'm happy that I'm not alone. Well, So
not at all, not at all.
great. Okay. So, but let's continue with the points one by one then. So, what were the other challenging points here, of finding success in Japan?
Well, I think the obvious one is doing business in a foreign country other than your native country, and oftentimes in a different language. So this sounds kind of obvious, but sometimes it can get frustrating because it's an added layer of difficulty that you obviously wouldn't have in your home country. So yeah, that would be the biggest challenge is culturally, I'm quite comfortable with most of Japanese culture, at least with the clients that I work with. But the language and kind of the bureaucracy of doing business in Japan is definitely a challenge. But then on the other hand, there are things that balance that out. So, for example, if you are a foreigner offering unique services, you can stand out much more here than in the United States or your home country. So, even though you do have these language and administration and cultural challenges, I believe there are a lot of benefits here that really cancel those out. I mean, to be honest, if I were living in America right now, I don't think I would be doing this business idea. I just don't think it's unique enough in that context. So yeah, there's another set of challenges, but again, I think they are outweighed by the benefits. But how about you and Tim? Any thoughts on these kinds of challenges? Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I think those are all really good points, but I really like your point about the advantages. If you play off the advantages you have, Japan has opened up opportunities for me personally that I would have never gotten in the U.S. I ended up being a factory manager, and that's not at all how I am wired. But Japanese gave me the chance to, they opened the door for me, and I developed in that direction. So it resonated what you're saying. And I guess it's recognizing your strategic advantage, what makes you different as a non-Japanese here and what you can offer that others can't.
Yes, indeed. Well, and I agree with Tim about it because I have seen quite a few foreign people working and living here in Japan who feel the difficulty of working with the bureaucracy and, well, the cultural differences as well, especially in business. And for many of them, instead of looking at this strategically and finding what is unique, it happens that they just get caught in their frustration, and which makes it difficult actually to move ahead. Yuka, good morning.
Good morning. Hi,
Good
Anthony.
morning.
I've been so
Good
looking
morning.
forward to be able to speak to you.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Because we're on the topic of challenges, I thought I would like to ask you a question. So actually, I was reading. There are a bunch of great articles in your website. So I recommend
Thank
everybody,
you.
going to the site, and especially this article. I think it's written by you. It's about how important to be able to read the air, because I just learned like just 2 days ago, Japanese youth, they use this like acronym, or maybe not acronym, like a ryakugo is KY, meaning that's referring to a person who cannot read the air. 空気が読めない, so KY. So I am a typical KY. And actually, I've lived in, I'm kind of reverse. I've lived in the state, California,
Oh, nice.
for last, maybe longer than I like to admit, like a multiple decades. Anyway, and then so the comparing to be able to read the air, I think it's important skill in any culture, any country. Do you find it's more difficult in Japan?
Wow. Well, first, several comments. I wonder if you've lived in California longer than I have. So that's.
I hope not. Okay.
So that's great. That's great. And secondly, if anyone's interested, the article you might have read might have been my Kokoro Media interview with Henry Seals, who is a foreign resident who actually became a Japanese citizen, and he really talked about reading
Yes,
there. Was that
yes,
the
and
article?
it's very
Perhaps?
interesting. He had
Okay.
to become a Japanese citizen, and the Japanese government officials were so surprised.
Yeah.
He went through to take this path of becoming a citizen. So yes, that's the exact article that I was sort of impressed with.
Okay, perfect. And just to clarify, Kokoro Media is one of my clients. I do have my blog, which has a few articles, but I write and advise Kokoro Media as one of my clients. But I definitely thank you for reading that, and I hope everyone checks it out. But to answer your question, yeah, I agree. Any country you go to, you have to figure out how to read the air. And honestly, I have trouble reading the air in my own country sometimes. So is Japan more difficult? I have to say, I think it is, simply because it is a high context culture where, if you're born here and raised here, as I'm sure you learn that how to read the air basically. And yes, that's something that can be studied and experienced when you come over here. But I feel like I'm always competing with the people who are native, because it's just part of the culture, it's part of how they were brought up. So do I think it's harder here? Yes. However, I think it's something we can get better and better at through having conversations with people, through studying the culture and learning the language. So yes, it's harder, but I think it can be improved, to answer your question. And I would love to hear Maya and Tim's thoughts on this as well, because they have even more experience kind of navigating this situation.
Just like Japanese language, reading the air is this ongoing, never-ending study that you have to continuously do. And personally, when I'm doing any kind of business dealings, mostly in the past, but I always liked having a native collaborator, Japanese, with me, and then discussing afterwards, whether it's a meeting or some kind of encounter, what wasn't said, and it's always interesting to get a Japanese point of view, and that's how I learn. So that's kind of how I approach it in my everyday life, and I always learn from those experiences. Your thoughts, Maya?
Yes, I agree with you. And for me personally, it was difficult in the beginning for the first 3 or 4 years of my life in Japan. So during those years, I asked my husband questions all the time. So it was like, why did they say that, but did that, something different, and so on. And it was just a constant struggle. It continues to be a very interesting experience for me, an ongoing experience as well. Sometimes I still ask questions, but as you said, the longer you live here, the more or the better equipped you become to understand what hasn't been said but is expected to be understood. So it's fascinating to me because there is one thing, which is very typical for the culture here. And once you get it, it becomes more easier for you to understand or to read the air. And it is what I mean is that basically you need to observe things and learn via observation. Of course, in the beginning, you also need a collaborator, as Tim said, a Japanese person, a native person who can explain the things to you. But once you get the basics, the gist, it becomes easier. So just be a good observer is something which makes things a little bit easier.
And
I'm sorry, before you go into Stephen, I'm sorry, Timothy. I just want to apologize because I thought Kokoro Media was your website, Anthony. I apologize.
No problem. A lot of people actually think that, just because I produce so much content for it and I proudly share it. So no problem at all. It's a compliment, actually.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then too bad,
Thank you.
there's no shortcut to be able to read the air, but I guess I have guessed it. Anyway, thank you.
Sure. Wonderful question.
good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Morning.
Hi, doing great. I'm having coffee at Starbucks Numazu right now. Beautiful weather. I'm enjoying the conversation, and it's funny that concept of reading the air, because last night we had a clubhouse room on working with Japanese, and we were talking about presentation. And one of the things that and it got me thinking, because I was sharing this. When you give a presentation in Japan, opposite to the West, I tend not to read the air. I just don't want to, because when you give a speech or just present a project, right, to a Japanese audience, I realize that every time I try to read the air like I would do in America, when I try to get a reaction from somebody, I get just like thrown off my game, because I just cannot read people's expression. So when you do like public speaking and things like that, and it was funny because yesterday I was actually sharing that, believe me or not, my Japanese is still very, very bad, but I give a lot of speeches in Japanese only. That takes a lot of preparation on my part. So I go there with that chip on my shoulder, like, am I going to say something stupid or pronounce it in a way that people don't understand? And so I always try to look at people in the eye and see, if I lose them in the story, and I don't get any reaction. So then then that actually just get me into a panic mode. So over time, I realized, you know what, I'm just going to go through the motion. I'm not going to try to read the air in terms of presenting a project, and we'll see what happens. So that's something that I feel works for me moving forward.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you brought that up. I agree in a presentation context, if your audience is 100% traditional Japanese, it might help just to, of course, maintain eye contact, but yeah, stay focused on your content and your delivery, just because you might not get a lot of feedback. In my case, most of my audience is usually mixed, Japanese and foreigner, or kind of global audiences. So usually kind of reading the air globally and presenting in a more Western style works for me, but I can also relate to exactly what you said. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's funny. I have found it more difficult to read Japanese folks one-on-one than reading an audience. And to the point that Stephen made, I agree. Like the Japanese, they tend not to show their facial expressions as much as Westerners, and again, I don't mean to stereotype, but tendency wise, right? But I gave a lot of seminars to Japanese audiences, and there are like subtle things like body language you pick up, and heads nodding when you say something, or you have jokes built into your presentation, and whether they laugh or not. So in a larger group, I guess I have found it a little bit easier to read, but still not as maybe clear as my compatriots' reaction. But again, one-on-one, sometimes I believe it's harder because Japanese have really good poker faces.
No, me. People said that they can read me like a book. Okay, anyway, sorry.
Well, that's so funny, Yuka, because when I first went to America with my wife, my family was so worried because they actually approached me privately and said, "We have no idea what your wife is thinking. Her facial features are always the same." They were almost in a panic. And then 30 years later, my wife laughs out loud without covering her mouth. You can just physically see the change, and she's much more expressive just because we lived in America for 3 decades. So I find it very interesting how people change and maybe grow. That is another way to put it. So maybe you've been in America for quite a long time, decades.
Yeah, I think it's right. Okay, so Saga Consulting. Yeah, so this is Anthony's website?
Well, Anthony?
Yes, so that is my website. So unfortunately, I don't have as much content there as in Kokoro Media because these days, and this is a good problem to have, almost all my writing time is devoted to client work. However, I'm working to fix that. You should see more content there. I've hired a writer to help me with my own marketing. But yes, that's my website that tells a lot about me and my services, and just kind of the content on the blog is either about what I've been speaking about, or just honestly, there's just a lot of content that was on my mind that I put into paper there. So yes, that's me.
I just noticed the same thing, that there is really a lot of content on Kokoro Media, and I'm sure that everybody who goes to Kokoro Media and is curious about Japan, of course, can find something to take away from the blog there. But of course, just branding is different, or it's not the same as marketing. So I believe that Kokoro Media has branded you as a Japan hand, Anthony, already, and it shows that it shows your deep knowledge about the country and how things work here, about doing business in Japan.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is a good time to kind of explain Kokoro Media and how I got into this situation, because it also ties into our theme of working in Japan and transitioning to working for yourself. So to give some background and an idea of how much work I've done for them. So they are one of my earliest clients. I started working for myself in 2017, and I connected with them in late 2017, early 2018. And at that time, they were a different brand. So the parent company is called Combrains, and this brand focuses on showcasing Japan, especially rural Japan, to the world. And I was just starting out. I was looking for clients, and I still didn't have a full load of work. I was still moving towards what I call life profitability, which is having enough independent work not only to exceed expenses, but to make a living. So I had some time. I saw a part-time writer advertisement. They were focusing on Shinjuku tourism at the time, and they even had a ryokan in Shinjuku. And I saw that, and I said, I have time. This seems like fun. Let me apply for it and make some money doing what I love to do, write about Japan. So I went there and had to interview with them in Japanese, and I did my best, and I realized I could better serve them in a vendor-client relationship. So I proposed, I said, look, I'm a writer. You don't need me sitting at a desk all of the time. It'll save you money, and it'll work well for me if, we could make a contract. And that's what happened. So maybe the first 2 years, I wrote basically 4 articles a month. So that's the rate at which I was creating content. Back then, it was focused on tourism because that what was booming. But then, as we all know, what happened in 2020, the pandemic, the tourism industry shut down, and fortunately, they pivoted to the brand that you know now, which is Kokoro Media. And so we shifted away from most of the tourism content and started exploring the people and the concepts and the culture that are here in Japan. And for me, I had to transition from writing about locations to more about sharing my thoughts, interviewing people, and so on. So that's this journey, and that's why you see so much content on that particular website. So they keep me busy, but it's a great thing, and it's been pushing me as a writer to share more about myself and my thoughts on Japan.
So it is different from your blog. I just want to make the difference, and if I made a mistake, to apologize for it.
Oh, no problem. Great question. Yes, it's different than my blog.
Okay.
100%. So if you go to Saga Consulting, I have a small blog there, just mainly to keep people up to date about my work, appearances, what I'm thinking, but it's much smaller. And again, that's a marketing flaw that I have right now in my business, and it's something I'm actively working to address this year. And finally, I'm in a position to do so.
Sorry, I'm in your website and I try to find out what this saga is derived from. Is that a saga prefecture or not?
I get that question a lot. It's a great talking point. It has a couple origin stories, but the best one is, number one, it's a word that is easy to say in English and Japanese. But more importantly, it represents the core of what I'm trying to do, and that is I help people or companies tell their stories abroad. And another word for story is saga. So it's a little grandiose.
Okay, got it. Story saga.
Right.
Okay.
So
it's a great name. Okay, thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. So that's what that's about.
What's even better is we just talked about it now, so people in the audience are never going to forget it.
I hope not. I hope not.
So, Anthony, could you just give us an example of, one of the stories you have created for a company here in Japan? Or because you said that you create stories which are told abroad. Maybe one example of that?
Sure. And I should stress, I say stories, but most of the time it's not in a literal sense. So basically, I see exposing Japanese companies and their mission, their vision to other countries as telling their story. But there are concrete examples of storytelling, and probably the best ones are the work that I did for Startup Guide. So there are 3 print books about the startup scene in Japan: Startup Guide Japan, Startup Guide Tokyo, and then Startup Guide Nagoya. And inside those books, we literally tell the stories of Japanese startups and sometimes large firms to the world. So that is accomplished through, interviews, learning why the founders started these companies, sharing how their companies are trying to change the world. And without those opportunities, I'm not sure how some of these companies would have gotten their messaging out of Japan. So to answer your question, there are times like that where I do get to tell concrete stories to the world.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell everybody here in the room, please, if you have time, please have a look at the Saga Consulting website, also Kokoro Media, and Anthony's personal webpage. Also, Ashley, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, how's everyone?
Good.
Thanks for coming up.
No, thank you for inviting me to the stage. And this morning I was looking through Clubhouse. I rarely get on, and I saw you all's room, and it looked pretty interesting, so I decided to stop in. Yeah, and my name's Ashley Wallace, if I could give you a brief introduction. And I've been in Japan for 11 years, but I am currently this year on my transition out back to the United States. I have had the opportunity to work in a few different industries, trying to kind of find my niche and where I fit in here. In Japan at some point, worked in construction, and got to work in consulting, which didn't go too well. That wasn't really my cup of tea. And I also got to work HR for my longest stint was at HR for a one of the ALT companies out here.
Nice.
And I transitioned out of that due to some of the things you were talking, you all were discussing about how to go about working with the Japanese, and the company, the culture there was very, despite it being an English teaching company, it was very hierarchical. I would say nenekoretsu, very nenekoretsu, very rigid. And these are things that I was all very familiar with Japanese, dealing with Japanese business and culture and things of that nature. But I figured out that at the end of the day, it was just something that I wasn't willing to deal with. And it's good to see that you all are here giving people the information to get into maybe businesses and ventures and things for themselves. Because at the end of the day, I do think that is the best way to kind of move about working in Japan. And currently, because of these experiences and things like that, I do have a podcast and a YouTube channel kind of explaining some of these things, issues, and interviews with particular individuals from Japan, and experiences that I've kind of went through to kind of give people a idea of what they will be getting themselves into in the case that they do come to Japan. And so they won't be as blindsided as I was when I came as a 24-year-old young man. Just solely really wanted to, increase my Japanese, and attempt to, work within the society, which I did get the opportunity to do and had a lot of experiences doing it. So, thanks for inviting me to the stage. And it seems like you have a lot of people with a lot of experience up here that can give a lot of good knowledge. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. And if I could say, respond to your comments and build on that and maybe put something out there for discussion. I related to your story a lot, especially with the kind of eikaiwa business and the hierarchy there. For me, one of the strong motivators to start working for myself was actually just kind of a glass ceiling for foreigners in the eikaiwa industry going
Exactly.
up. So you can relate to that. I definitely can relate to what you said. That being said, and maybe this is a topic for debate, and Timothy, Maya, everyone, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. My experience having worked in both countries for a decent amount of time is that I've found that choosing the right corporate culture is much more important than worrying about the national cultures. And what I mean by that is, the companies that have worked me the hardest, like the super overtime, was actually in the States when I worked for the gaming industry. That's the most crazy hours and working situation that I've ever had. And then there's the whole bureaucracy and all of that. Well, working for the government in America is very similar to the bureaucracy you find in a lot of Japanese companies as well. So for me, wherever you are in the world, in my experience, the most important thing has been choosing the right corporate culture. And if you check out my resume, I worked at Eon, and they had a pretty wonderful corporate culture, at least in my corner of the organization. It was very friendly, very fun to work there. There were limits to how far you could go, but they didn't work you to the bone. They didn't make you go drinking every day and things like that. And it was a really wonderful experience, but that was a Japanese experience at a Japanese company. So I'm real big on choosing the right corporate culture, more so than worrying about the international culture. But that could be up for debate. So, Ashley, Timothy, Maya, I'd like to throw that out there and see what you think.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off what you said, Anthony. I got to a point, and Ashley, thank you for your input. When it comes to Japanese companies, I had very low expectations going in terms of I never thought, I'm going to join a Japanese company and be the president someday. That was never my aspiration. I was there to learn. And to, Anthony, that's why one of your presentations I saw resonated. What you're saying is something that echoes my attitude is, in a sense, you work for a Japanese company. It's like you're getting your MBA, but they're paying you to do it because you're learning a lot. And that was the benefit for me of working for Japanese companies, because I learned a lot. And so, that was my attitude. And to me, I always saw it as a stepping stone to something better. Now, that said, I also worked for an American company, and American companies were a lot of fun, but I didn't learn as much. And it had its own set of issues. And in the end, I chose to walk away from all corporate America, because I was kind of like, to Anthony's point about, being happy in your life, seeking success. I decided at one point I didn't want to have 70 people working for me. I just wanted to be responsible for myself, my family, and do work that I really enjoyed. So I walked away from all of it. My point is, both Japan and the U.S. corporate cultures, to me personally, had different sets of issues that I liked and didn't like. And in the end, I walked away, went on my own.
Well, I cannot agree more about that. And what I wanted to say is that you keep learning, and you keep looking for the corporate culture, which makes you feel not just comfortable, but which makes you or lets you use your potential. So because sometimes you can feel comfortable, but it makes you kind of complacent. You like the culture, but you cannot do what you really want. So there are different aspects to this, I believe. And what I have found to work for me is that you just need to watch, to learn, and constantly update your knowledge, and of course think about what you want to do next. So personally for me it has been, well, I have been working for the same very traditional, very well structured Japanese organization for 14 years. And well, it has been fun. I have learned a lot. It has been a truly educational time. And thanks to those years there, I actually discovered what I'm good at, what I can use as an advantage as a foreigner here in Japan. And at the end of the day, the time I discovered also that, like you, Anthony, I want to get in direct touch with the end customer, and basically not go through all the loops and circles, of the hierarchy to get one thing done, and wait for a month, to get the permission for doing that. So yeah, it's just like you learn, you update, yourself too, and decide what you do next. Indeed, it's not so much about the national culture or the culture in general here in Japan. It's more about the organization which you work for.
Yeah, and one other point I wanted to make, that in the past, I think the idea of working for a corporation made people feel safe. And I think that's a myth now. Like, I don't really think just because you work for a corporation that you should feel safe. And so the appeal of being part of a big company, some of the value in some people's minds, I think, has been eroded. And some
Yes.
people might say I'm safer being on my own.
Yes, Timothy, you made some great points that I was like, wow, you were kind of reading my mind with some of these things. And those are the type of things that I wish I knew as a young man when coming into Japan, because I had that American mindset, like, oh, I can come into a Japanese company and learn Japanese and, go to the top and, that yada, yada, yada. But then I had to learn on my own that wasn't the case. And like you did say, I wish I would have came into the mindset like, okay, I'm going to come to Japan, learn this language, and just go into companies just to solely get experience and learn, but not look for, oh, I'm going to become section manager, or I'm going to be able to take on all these responsibilities and all these new projects and innovate and do all of these things. I need to come into this company to solely gain knowledge. And then when I feel that I've peaked and then I feel that I'm done here, then move on. So now after 11 years, after talking to people and really sitting back and thinking about it and having my family and things of that nature, I've come to a realization that I've accumulated a nice amount of experience. I have become fluent in this language, and I have a lot of knowledge to take back home to, potentially, who knows, cash out for about 5 years at some company, maybe start something on my own, or more or less, who knows, maybe come back here and start something again. I'm not too sure at this point. I'm 34. I got a little bit of time under my belt. Yeah, those are the things I wish I would have known when I came in at 24 years old.
Yeah, if I could add a couple points to what you said, and also what circle back to what Tim said. I think it's important to point out that if you do leave Japan, it's not like you're locked out forever. You can come back, and I used to be like terrified of leaving Japan when I first started here. I was younger, and but then as I grew older, and finding opportunities here to grow became harder. I'm like, even if I have to go back to the States, just like you, Ashley, I thought I could take this experience with me, see what's going on over there, and build myself up over there, and then try to come back to Japan again. So for anyone listening to this who's in a similar situation, you can always come back. And then circling back to what Timothy said, I wanted to second that fact that, yes, in the past, in America and Japan and many other countries, the safest, most secure way was to work for a large organization. However, I got a wake-up call around the Lehman Brothers incident back, was it like 2007, 8, 9, around when I first came to Japan, thankfully, and I was working in government. Fortunately, my timing was lucky, and I came to Japan. But during that time, I saw government employees get fired or furloughed, and that was a big wake up call. That I don't think anything's secure, and you need to be working for yourself or working for a company you believe in. You just really have to pay attention and look after yourself, because companies are not going to take care of you all the time.
Maya, actually, I was intrigued by the comment that you have just made maybe 10 minutes ago or so. You said sometimes there is a benefit for being a foreigner. And I was just thinking, I can so relate because I've been working in U.S. corporation in the financial industry for a long time. And sometimes I use a Japanese card, I often get criticized for because I have to write the research report all the time, and then sometimes I write the long-winded sentences, and then my boss pointed out, "Oh, I'm sorry, in Japan we tend to write the long sentence," and probably not true, but my boss was laughing, and oh, okay, Yuka and her Japanese cards. So sometimes you can take advantage of being a foreigner, Anthony. So maybe what are the benefits of being foreigners in Japan, if you could share some examples?
Sure. Yeah, I think you have to be careful about that. So for me, the benefit is the standards are different. So for example, some Keigo, and I can introduce myself in companies, I can write emails and do kind of entry level Keigo, but I can't sustain a 2 hour long meeting filled with the right Keigo words and grammar and things like that. However, if I can just do a little bit of Keigo, I get a foreign pass, So those are the advantages. We're not expected to be perfect. However, on the flip side, I never use my nationality as an excuse or say this is how it's done in America, because that won't work in Japan. So to answer your question, the benefits are that we are allowed to be different or expected to be different, but I don't think we can, actively use our country as an excuse to do something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I'm so regretting that I spoke up because I didn't mean to offend anybody, Japanese or American or anybody.
Oh, I don't
So
think you did.
no,
I
actually,
don't think
No
you
one's
did.
offended.
Yeah, nobody.
sometimes yeah, I know, being a foreigner, I'm not recommending that you use the being in the foreigner status as an excuse. So thank you, Anthony. You made it clear. Thanks.
Yeah, and I didn't think you did. I just wanted to add that to it, just to clarify and help anyone, because we're all tempted to do that. It's so easy, and in my private life, I slip up and say that, maybe to my wife or something, and then I realize, okay, well, that's not probably not a good approach. So yeah, that was just kind of a bonus, some bonus content as well.
Yes, and there is, if I can add something, there is always, a way to make your nationality an excuse. If you spice it with a sense of humor, then I think that people will never be offended. And if you say it in a humble way, everybody would rather accept that yes, there are differences and we are not the same. So sometimes they come from nationality, sometimes they come from a different background. So just be positive and Tim, don't take yourself too seriously, right?
Exactly. You don't want to take your. And the thing is, we all know the expression to play the gaijin card, and some people don't like it because it sounds very manipulative. But just to give you a different perspective, and I spoke with Maya and actually Timothy Langley about this. Japanese people that I worked with would come up to me privately and say, "Tim, use your gaijin power and talk to Tanaka-san. Take him out for drinks, and you can say direct things that we can't say, and maybe gently nudge him, because if we say it, we'll get in trouble." So I've actually had Japanese people ask me to play the gaijin card for them. So it does exist. I don't know if I'm the only one, but
No, you're absolutely correct. I totally agree with that, and that kind of goes into what I wanted to say about working in a back office setting or in the office. I always use that card, especially at my last company, because just their values and, as you said, their culture fit for me. To me, this company wasn't very ethical. Okay, but due to the fact that there were also other Japanese within that company that would talk to me about the issues, because they know I'm not within the nemawashi, mindset of just, oh, okay, yeah, just go ahead and do it because, hey, Sacho said or Bucho said, just do it, But I would always pull my gaijin card. I'd say, no, that's not okay. That's not all right. That's not going on, et cetera, and not receive as much if any backlash, not even from like the sacho level or kacho or whatever, about anything. It would probably be said behind closed doors because as we all know about tatemae, you know. So whatever meeting I had with somebody after this, I was probably discussed afterwards in whatever light, either good or bad. At that point, I really didn't care. But you're absolutely right. So I always used to use that because I used to speak. I think when I used to talk about the unethical things and the things that weren't okay, I was also speaking for those individuals that would come to me and talk, right, and couldn't do that. So before I went to y'all's stage, because I do have to go, I want to give one good story that I gave to them at that office. At the peak of the corona outbreak, there was a mass email that went out, and somebody in the Tokyo office had gotten corona. At that time, I was always saying, like, why are we not going remote? We can do our work remote. What's going on? You're putting people at risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody listened, of course, but at least I always say, like, at least if I say something, you know where I stand, you know my boundaries. So don't step into them, in the case that, this particular occurrence happened, because I already told you. So when that message came out, I sent to everybody, and that mass message basically stating that I was very unfortunate and very professionally, is now at this point, since somebody has received corona, is HR putting anything in place to have some type of, shifted remote work or whatever it so may be? 30 individuals like that email. 30. Not only foreigners, Japanese as well. And nothing still happened. And I told people that, I'm like, do you all realize that? You have to realize that, and people don't look at it like that. 30 people like that email. So why didn't 30 people say anything? Why?
I appreciate, what you said, Ashley, and I feel for you. I think the key is when you say play the gaijin card, if you're always playing it, it has no power. And I think anyone who is strategic understands that when you're in Japan, you got to pretty much, do your best to follow the rules. But as you said, sometimes you have to pick your battles. And in your case, it was based on your values, right? Something that you felt was very important to take a stand. And if you do it not all the time, strategically, when you really believe in something, I think then there is, a nobility about that. There's something that's very, very good about doing it. So I feel for you.
Thanks, Timothy.
And I understand where it was coming from.
For me personally, my experience, like how I see the benefit of being a foreigner in Japan, is when it comes to networking and build relationship. I think it's a great icebreaker to start a conversation when you're a foreigner, because it triggers sort of interest, from the other party, and that's where I think it's very beneficial. If I was, my wife is Japanese, right, and just the way she interact with new acquaintances, it's very more formal and there's not much questions. But because I'm a foreigner, I always have like, so where are you from? And then we can start talking about things that are either unrelated to what we're trying to do. But I really felt like it's a great ice-breaking attribute.
Yeah, I have to second that, and all of this connects back to Yuka's original question, but that's a great point. Try going to a 100% Japanese business networking event, and it's, people are going to talk to you. They're going to say, who is this guy here who looks different or acts different than all of us? And you end up striking up all of these conversations and making connections, and that's, for better or worse, yeah, it is a great icebreaker. So I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, and I also think this is in the advantage part. As Anthony mentioned, if you're not a native Japanese speaker, and even if you are, you might not be that good at using keigo, but because you're a foreigner and they see you put in a lot of effort to learn their language and do your best, and that you're sincere and you're trying, that's worth a lot here, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. My Japanese, I speak and communicate Japanese, but it's certainly not natural. But everyone has been so accommodating and encouraging just by putting in the effort, and that is a luxury that really only foreigners can enjoy.
And if I can add one more thing, that we always need to start with the showing respect here. Well, we have seen a few people, they come from overseas, kicking and screaming and thinking that they can improve whatever they think needs to be improved here in the country. But I always say that's not the way to approach anything here in Japan. So you observe, you learn, you show respect, you follow the rules, and well, that's how it goes. You do what you need to do to develop, let's say, your business or work in a company. So it's always a difficult balance, I believe, for everybody. But as long as we try to find it proactively and with a positive attitude, it's not really so difficult to go forward. Sade, or is it Shade? I hope I don't mispronounce your name. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's Sade.
Sade, yes.
Like
How
the
are you?
singer.
Yes, like the singer, absolutely, Timothy. Hello, good evening, everyone. I was prompted by, I believe your name is Maya. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you do.
I was prompted by something beautiful that you said. As an expat, when I was an expat going back home to Nigeria, the same thing was felt by a lot of the locals. I'm based in America, the United States, in New York, but that feeling of external folks coming in and thinking they can shift and do better and things of that nature really created tension in a culture that was already highly tense, even if there were changes that were needed. And I like to reference an idea or an ideology that is, I believe, inspired by the Japanese influence in Scrum. And what you said really ties in well with this ideology, and that's shuhari. I've mentioned this in rooms a lot, but the concept of shuhari is to really learn the rules, then master it, and then style it. So I really love what you said because it not only applies to going to different countries, but even as a newcomer in any situation, whether you're entering into new teams as a leader, new manager, and executive. It's so important to really observe and learn the rules, learn the ways that the team is currently working in, honor what is already there, and then really master it. And then from there, you can style it iteratively once trust has been built. So I really love what you said, and it resonated with me so much so. So thank you. And I've landed my plane.
Yeah, thank you. Anthony, yes?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to second that as well. There's a phrase, and this applies to writing as well. Is you have to know the rules before you can try to break them. And just real quickly to add to that, if you are struggling with the rules or the hierarchy or whatever, I think another good approach is as Sade said, you have to learn the rules and follow the rules. But also, if you have a big idea or something you want to change, I think you need to show some proof of concept or demonstrate how it's going to benefit the situation or the company. And maybe it's a matter of prototyping something off on the side and showing that it can generate revenue or showing that it can work. But you can't just kind of say you should do this or you should do that with no proof or no backing. So I just wanted to add that real quickly.
And I'd love to add on top of that, not only with no proof or no backing, but trust. And I think back to something Maya said is by sitting there and observing and listening and understanding the challenges and the nuances and gaining the trust of the team, I think that really helps to accelerate any changes that one might want to implement. So I love, Anthony, that you mentioned the prototyping and the iterative approach to creating some type of culture shift or shift in workflows or whatever the solution it is. But I think what really, solidifies all of that is the trust. Because let's just say we prototype something or we offer a solution and it doesn't pan out. Having the trust of the team really allows for softer landing, even in the case that it doesn't pan out. So I land my plane there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love the point you made about what happens if your idea does fail to deliver. Like you said, if you have trust, it's going to soften the blow. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Shade. And well, Anthony, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to be our guest speaker today. This has been a great conversation. Yuka, thank you for making great points. And Stephen, for sharing your experiences here. Shade, thank you for coming up on stage and talking with us. Anthony, if you have a few words in closing before we say goodbye, please tell us for everybody who is trying to build a business here.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Tim again for your time and making this happen and having me on. And I want to thank everyone who participated and took time out of their morning to join us. And I really hope you found some insightful takeaways from this. As far as final thoughts and advice, again, I think it comes back to number one, defining what you want and what success means to you. But one thing that has been in the back of my mind that I haven't been able to say yet is, I think a lot of this conversation is bigger than just Japan. And I think, as we hinted at, whatever culture you're going into, it's going to have its pros and cons and its challenges and positives. And you basically have to find out what mix of challenges and benefits work for you. And, there's a lot of countries in the world where we can go and exist and live. And if you're unhappy with a certain situation, I think it's on us to explore those opportunities wherever they are in the world. And that doesn't mean, picking up all your bags and dropping everything and running over to a new country, but you can take baby steps to get there, just like I did coming to Japan. I mean, I vacationed here 2 times before I decided I wanted to live here. So if anyone there is thinking about change, I just encourage you to, have an open mind. Don't make any rash decisions, but whether it's business or where to live, see what baby steps you can take, see what experiments you can run to start pointing you in the right direction.
Great points. Yes. Thank you very much for that. So, Anthony, thank you for being our guest speaker. I wish everybody a great day, a successful day, and a successful remainder of the week. See you next time then. Thank you for coming and staying with us today. We will be on air next week on Thursday at 8 a.m. Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the role of Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, you can follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Again, we're looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and make the best of the day. See you.